Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing with you the books that I have enjoyed the most so far this year. So my top books of the year so far. They're not going to be in any particular order, just kind of as I pick them up from this stack in front of me. I do want to start with the two books that I don't physically own copies of so that I don't forget about them, and I think there are 11 books on this list. I couldn't quite narrow it down to 10. So the first one is A Cuban Girl's Guide to Tea and Tomorrow. This was a book I listened to on audiobook from Scribd, and I really enjoyed this. So this is sort of also a stand-in for all of the kind of contemporary books that I've read that have to do with, like, it's sort of like a little sweet love story with food involved. For some reason, I just found that that was something I really enjoyed. There were a couple of other books that I read along the same lines. This one follows a girl who has just recently lost her abuela, and she is grieving pretty heavily for her abuela and is just not coping. And so her family sends her to her aunt's house in England, where she ends up kind of learning to move on, and also she learns a lot of stuff about herself, and there's a lot of cooking and just food, and it was a joy to read or to listen to, and the love story was really sweet as well. This is a YA contemporary, but yeah, I loved it. I would recommend it on audiobook as well. Next up is going to be the first of many actually in this stack that are from the Women's Prize shortlist, long list. I had a really great go of it with a lot of the books on that list this year. And as you will see, because many of them show up here, the first one is Unsettled Ground by Claire Fuller. And this book is, so it follows two siblings who are in their 50s and have lived their entire life with their mother on this rural farm. And right at the beginning of the story, their mother dies, and they are sort of left to figure out what's, you know, to unravel some different pieces. Their lives are not, they don't go very well. It's set in, so it's actually a contemporary novel, but because they live in a pretty poverty-stricken situation, they are kind of existing without a lot of modern conveniences. So at first I thought this was a historical novel until certain aspects of it started to develop, and then I realized that this was in our modern time and they just don't have a lot of modern conveniences. And it's just something about the way that Claire Fuller writes is just so intriguing and beautiful, and I absolutely am going to be picking up more of her novels in the future because I really got along well with this. Yeah, to me it felt a little bit like Hamnet in the feel of the novel, but the subject matter is very, very, very different, and like I said, contemporary, not historic. Well, since we're talking about Women's Prize listed books, the next one I want to talk about is Transcendent Kingdom by Yaa Gyasi. So this one is, I believe, Gyasi's second novel. The first one was Homegoing, which I liked it, but I didn't love it. This one, on the other hand, I absolutely adored. So this is about a woman named Gifty who is, it's just her growing up, and we are kind of watching in retrospect. So she's thinking back on her childhood and her teen years and everything, and her relationship with her mother and her father and her brother. Her brother has passed away, and she is sort of coping with the circumstances of his death and the things that led up to him passing away. She's also coping with her mother, who is grieving very heavily still for the brother, even though it's been many years. And So her mother has come to stay with her, and she is in school for, I think, biology. She's in a science field, and her mother is very religious and relies on religion for a lot in her life. And this is a beautiful exploration of like the intersection of science and religion, but also of someone coming to terms with and explaining how the different sides of people who are very like church focused, because it does talk about the people in her town and how they would react in church versus how they were outside of church, or when somebody wasn't listening, like the pastor or something. And I identified a lot with that because I had experiences that were very similar in like tone to what Gifty witnessed, not in subject matter or like what they were talking about, but the way that dual nature of a lot of people who their whole life is church, but they also are not good stewards of what they believe. So yes, I thought this was incredible. It did a lot of really amazing things, and honestly, I think that this is the one that I expect to win the Women's Prize for Fiction, but we shall see. Next up, this one was on the long list, and that is Detransition Baby by Tori Peters. So Tori Peters was the first trans woman to be listed for the Women's Prize for Fiction, which is amazing. This is a story that I don't know what I expected going into it, but it is essentially the story of three people, and they're kind of like how they're kind of creating a bit of a family, but not really. The main protagonist, so there's three perspectives. I'm having a hard time explaining this. There's three perspectives. There's Ames, who detransitioned from a woman to a man, and then there is Reese, who is a trans woman and has really just wanted a family and wanted to be part of a family for a very long time. And then you have Ames's boss slash lover, Katrina, who has her own things that she's gone through. She's a cis woman, and Ames gets Katrina pregnant, and it's about sort of the different paths that have led to this moment, as well as where they go from here. And it just, to me, was such an incredible learning experience, because there's a lot in here about the trans community and what especially trans women go through. And it was just eye-opening, because a lot of that stuff I'd never really heard articulated, and I just thought this was incredible. The story is really incredible, and just kind of exploring all of the different nuances of the different relationships in this. So highly recommend this one. All right, so now we're going to go back to YA for a minute, and we have Camp by Elsie Rosen. And this was just an all-out joy to read. So this follows Randy, who has been going to this camp that's for gay teens, for LGBTQIA teens for a few years, and has always had a crush on this guy who's very like masculine and only attracted to masculine guys. And Randy is very flamboyant, part of the drama club, loves nail polish and fans and glitter, and Randy is determined to make this guy like him. So he shows up to camp dressed masculine and trying to project masculinity, doesn't join the drama club play for the year, and does like the obstacle course and everything. And it's just like a really interesting look at the queer community in a different way. So it was nice to see the interactions between Randy and his bunkmates, and kind of how they were trying to help Randy, but also trying to point out flaws in the plan and ways that this could go wrong, and the relationship that develops between Randy and this guy was really interesting to watch. So it was there were moments of like, oh girl, how's this going to end? But overall, I thought this was a really well told queer story, and there was just a lot of dimension and rep in here, and it was so much fun, and I just wish that this had existed, and also this camp had existed when I was a teenager. I have a graphic novel, which I'm not going to talk a lot about because I feel like everybody is talking about this. This is the 3rd volume of Heartstopper by Alice Oseman, and this is just precious. It's heartwarming. The relationship between these two characters as they kind of get to know each other and get to know themselves is really sweet, and I just feel like this is a warm hug of a graphic novel. So if you're looking for a queer graphic novel that just will make you happy, there's definitely instances of bullying and things like that in here, but I think it's dealt with really well, and I feel like especially young queer kids could really see themselves in this, and it's just very simple art style, which I always love. But yeah, this is precious and adorable, and if you haven't picked these up, I recommend them. Next up, I've got 2 sci-fi books. The first one is pretty far into the Murderbot novellas, so I'm not going to give away a whole lot about this. I do feel like this one sort of can stand on its own a little bit, although if you don't know the background of Murderbot, then a lot of this won't make any sense. But basically, this is Sherlock Holmes meets Murderbot, because Murderbot has to figure out a crime that has been committed on Preservation Station. So a man has been found murdered, and they need to figure out how it happened, who did it, all of that. And Murderbot's on the case, and this was absolutely a joy. If you're interested in sci-fi, these are slim little novellas. The first one is All Systems Red, and this is just, they're a joy. Murderbot is so much fun, and I feel like we can all relate a little bit because it doesn't want to deal with other people, and I don't know. These are just so much fun to read, and this one especially I thought was just a different take, a fresh take on the Murderbot novellas, so yes. And then we have the lovely Becky Chambers with The Galaxy and the Ground Within. So this one is just like the rest of them in that it is a kind of a encapsulated different world from all the rest of the Wayfarers books. This one we are on a Passover, like a rest stop planet. And then there's a LaRue, so a species that is the proprietor of like an inn sort of situation. And then we have 3 other species that are there stopping through on their way to somewhere else. And then so the satellite, there's this disruption in the satellites, which causes a big kind of explosion, and things go haywire, and everybody is grounded and they can't leave, and all 3 of the people have reasons that they need to be somewhere else or something that they were on the way to do. They're also dealing with a lot of internal kind of things that are happening for them. So we have a Quaylen who is on his way to a really important meeting that he can be late for. We have a Eluan, which that person is on her way to meet up with someone very dear to them, and only has so much time to spend, is kind of grappling with a relationship issue. And then we have I can't remember, I'm blanking on what the species is called. Anorak, maybe? Anorak? That seems right. And this individual, she is of a species that people don't typically interact with on a regular basis, and is her name is Speaker, and she can speak to and like adapt herself to situations to make other people comfortable, but is not really comfortable in and has never really been in social settings where it's not like a business transaction. So all these people are lumped together on this planet, stuck together for a little while, and it's about their interactions and about the things they learn and the things they teach each other. And it's just, it's so wholesome. It's Becky Chambers. It's lovely, it's wholesome, and I just think to myself, anytime I read her books, what must it be like to have an imagination that creates these complex species and relationship dynamics and political dynamics and world building. It's just incredible to me. And yeah, I feel like this one is definitely either my favorite or my second favorite in the Wayfarers quartet. I just absolutely adored this book. And then to round out this list of 10, it's just 10, not 11, it's 10. I have 2 nonfiction books. The first one is World of Wonders, and this book is beautiful. As a physical object, it's gorgeous. It has some beautiful artwork in there and some different, so I think it's between every 2 chapters maybe. It has some gorgeous artwork. Yeah. But not only that, it is just absolutely stunningly written. So I want to say the author is a poet, but definitely the prose of this are very poetic. And I love the way that she talks about the natural world and how she weaves her own experiences and her coming of age with aspects of the natural world and the impact those had on her. I especially love the conversation around fireflies. And when she talks at one point about how in a class, when she was talking about fireflies, there were kids who thought they weren't real because they had never seen them in person. And that breaks my heart, because that was one of my favorite things in childhood, was running around, catching fireflies, watching fireflies. I still to this day will stand on my porch and just watch them blink because I just think they're amazing. So yeah, this resonated with me a lot as someone who grew up playing outside and really appreciates nature. It definitely encouraged me to continue to introduce nature and the natural world to my child as he gets older and older. And then last but certainly not least is The Undocumented Americans. And this is an impactful book. It is just like nothing else I feel like I've read recently. Carla is telling the story of undocumented Americans. So people who have lived in this country for 5 years, for 15 years, for 40 years as undocumented Americans. And it's the stories of their everyday lives. It's the things that they deal with on a regular basis, but it's also about their families and what that constant fear can do to their mind, their body, their relationships, and just the things that I feel like most Americans, if not all Americans, take for granted about undocumented Americans. So it talks about day laborers and how so much of the construction industry depends on day laborers. It talks about, people who are ripped away from their families, or families who have had a loved one deported and what it does to the children. It talks about those who took sanctuary in a church and what that means, and how that affected them and how that affected their families and their friends and their loved ones. And it's just, I can't say enough about what an eye-opener this book was, but also just like on a deep level, like this made me angry and sad, but also happy, because just seeing the communities that surrounded these people, like there are people who care. It's just like there's so much wrong with the concept of borders and nations laying claim to land and things like that, that just, yeah, this was incredible. If you have not picked this up, I encourage everyone to give this a read, or at least everyone who lives in the United States to give this a read. All right, so those are the 10 books that I consider my top books of 2021 so far. I would love to hear if you've read any of these down below, what ones you read, if they were also favorites of yours. And I'd also love to hear what your top books are so far this year, because I started this book this year with 75 books on my shelf. It's halfway through the year, and there are still 75 unread books on my shelf, even though I've read 51 books. So I have a book buying problem. Anyways, that is neither here nor there. Yeah, I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time. Bye.